What's going on? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Ryan, and today in this video we're going to answer the age-old question of how much power creep is actually in Disney Lorcana from set to set. Now I guarantee if you were to take a deck from set 1 and put it up against set 5, for example, you're going to be pretty outmatched, given that as each set comes out, Ravensburger has been adding more and more game actions as well as additional interactions that you can do per turn, and then not to mention with the whole shift mechanic, as more characters come out, you're going to have more options for your shift characters, which didn't exist all the way back in set 1. But the real question here is, from set to set, what is the real power difference? And could you show up to a tournament with a deck from your last set and be competitive in the new set? Luckily for us, over the weekend, we had 2 different tournaments played on the 2 different formats. The first one for Ursula's return is the big Disney Lorcana challenge that happened in Toronto. It was the final challenge to take place on set 4 Ursula's return, but this one didn't have Bucky as the errata was in place. And then privately, there was also a triple case tournament hosted and ran by Red Saber Games, where we got to see some of the new deck ideas for Shimmering Skies and how they all matched up against them in a competitive format. I'll leave timestamps if you're interested in one tournament deck list versus the other. You can go ahead and find that in the description. Or if you really want to see how the 2 sets compete against each other, at the end of the video we'll be spinning wheels to randomly decide what deck we'll play, and then we'll give the computer a different deck and then load them both up onto Inktable. We'll do this a couple times and see if we can really compete in a set 5 meta with an Ursula's return deck. With all that out of the way, thank you guys for watching. The support recently has been crazy, and I can't wait until we can get to 1,000 subscribers so we can give away our copy of the D23 collector set. I'll put a link to the giveaway video in the description, so that all you have to do is just click on it, leave a comment, make sure you're subscribed, and you'll be entered in for a chance to win once we reach that 1,000 subscriber milestone. So starting off, we're going to get this information actually from a website called inkdex.com. They have a tournament tab where you can find all the latest tournaments that have been played that publicly post their deck lists so that you can go and view them and see what other players in a competitive scene are playing. We'll start with the triple case tournament for Shimmering Skies. Again, thank you to Red Saber Games for posting this information and making it publicly available for us. It actually looks like for this tournament, they went ahead and just intentionally tied for the top place. So we do have 2 first listings here on the page, but coming in first and second, we have a combination of Red Blue and Ruby Amethyst. Let's go ahead and load up the Sisu on Ice deck and see what it looks like. So for these deck reviews, I'm going to go ahead and run through the deck list quite quickly, just so we can get through them all and get to the gameplay section of the video. If you want to pause the video and take a screenshot to copy down these decks, feel free. As I said before, all this information is publicly available on inkdex.com. So starting off, this is a Sisu on Ice type of deck, using the ice blocks so that our Sisu characters can affect more characters on the other side of the board. The new additions from Shimmering Skies look to be including 4 copies of Tipo, giving this deck a little bit extra ramp and a little bit earlier ramp, and an alternative to Fishbone if you don't find that early in the game. The other new card that I see being included is the new Cusco card, giving Sapphire a way to deal with items and locations. I think this card is very, very good, and it also gives you somewhat of a Cogsworth ability. You do have to pay for ink in order to use it, but as a 6-cost inkable card, I can definitely see why this was included in the deck, especially when you are getting rid of items for good, so that your opponent can't go and fetch them later from the discard pile with their own Tamatoa. I think this is a card that we're going to start seeing way more often. There's also an action in Shimmering Skies that does the same effect, but I think the trend so far in Shimmering Skies has been to lean more towards characters just because of the threat of Daisy Duck. Other than that, the only action that they're running in this deck is one of the new cards, Vision of the Future. This is just like a super powered version of Develop Your Brain. You actually get to look at the top 5 cards of your deck to really go and grab whatever is going to be the most useful for you at the time. And Ruby Sapphire in general really needs to just churn through their deck to get the most optimum card at any given time. So I'm not surprised to see this card, and just being 1 more ink over your Develop Your Brain. I think this is a very good meta card for not only just Ruby Sapphire, but pretty much all Sapphire decks. All right, and next up, we've loaded up the Ruby Amethyst tied for first place deck. This looks like it's going to be just a classic Ruby Amethyst bounce type of deck with your Chernobog's, the magic rooms that we saw from last set. In terms of new cards coming to Ruby Amethyst, the only thing that they actually ended up running was one copy of Elsa, the Fifth Spirit. This is one of the cards that came with the Ruby Amethyst starter deck, so it should be pretty attainable if you already have a Ruby Amethyst deck to go and grab it, throw this in, as well as they have 2 copies of the library, which also come with the starter deck. This is just a solid, well-balanced overall Ruby Amethyst bounce deck, being able to get all that card draw, being able to constantly bounce your own characters, to recycle them. We've seen this now for 5 sets, so no one should be surprised at the playstyle or the potency of Ruby Amethyst. The only thing I would be a little bit on the fence about, which clearly wasn't a problem in this tournament, is relying on Be Prepared and Friends on the Other Side. Be Prepared in particular, now that Pete is a thing in Shimmering Skies, is something that worries me compared to the same cost of a Scar. I tend to like that Scar a little bit more just because it can challenge anything that's already on the field exerted, and it can't be blocked if your opponent had played a Pete on the turn before. Whereas with relying on Be Prepared coming down on turn 7, it's very predictable, and a Pete coming out on turn 6 could completely block you for a whole turn, which means your opponent, based on their playstyle, could be that much closer to closing out the game. All right, and then moving on to the top 4 decks. First up, we have a Amethyst Steel deck. This is going to be a bounce control type of deck, utilizing new cards like the new Madam Mim, using the new Pete to really recycle your cards and keep the board state in a status quo and under your control, while utilizing the powers of both Amethyst and Steel to make sure that the tempo is always in your favor. The new cards they've added into this version of the deck, at the 1 cost slot, it's going to be the new Cogsworth card. Giving rush to any character on your side of the field is super strong for just a 1 cost character, especially since he can also give it to himself, which could be useful in certain situations. That combined with like Merlin Crab, where you could turn Cogsworth essentially into a 4/1 with rush on turn 4 if you play them both at the same time, is almost just as good as having a Madam Mim without needing to replace something when it entered the field. They're also utilizing the new Madam Mim. She is a 3/7. Again, if you can give her rush and get some cheap damage onto her, you can start utilizing that second ability of moving 2 damage from this character to an opposing character, giving you even more value for the bounce that she provides. They also used 3 copies of the new Elsa card with both rush and evasive. Not only are you going to be able to target almost every character that your opponent has, it also has the ability to exert opposing characters. So as long as they don't have ward, pretty much anything on your opponent's side of the board is vulnerable to a surprise attack from this Elsa. Now, differing from Sapphire, who has the Cusco to deal with items and locations, Steel actually got a similar card in the Simba card. And when you play them, you actually get to banish a chosen item or location, which, like I said, is very useful to get them off the board. If you're playing somebody that has item retrieval, they're not gone for the entire game, but this is just a character version of Rise of the Titans, which is very useful in this set. And then since this deck was playing with Elsa the Fifth Spirit, they've also included the 8 cost Shift 6 Elsa Spirit of Winter. I don't think they've played with the enchanted versions, but you never know. And when you play this Elsa, you can exert up to 2 chosen characters. They can't ready at the start of the next turn. And then you can bounce this card and probably do it all over again, meaning you can really lock down your opponent's side of the board, especially if they have some big questers or if they have some big damage dealers. You can just keep them exerted, keep your characters a little bit safe, and keep the lore totals in check. Other than that, everything is pretty standard for the actions and songs that they've included. And then, as always, Queen's Castle, one of the strongest locations in the game. Obviously 4 copies of that included as well. All right, and then the other deck that made top 4 for this tournament, it's gonna be a Ruby Amber Mufasa deck. This one is completely character-based, 60 characters, using things like Pluto and Gaston to get some of your bigger characters out that much sooner. Also utilizing things like Mulan Injured Soldier and Mother Gothel to get some guaranteed damage on your characters for a target. For Rapunzel to heal, we see that the set 1 Gaston Arrogant Hunter is included just to deal with the Daisy Duck, given it's a turn 2 4 strength card. And then a card that I'm actually surprised that's in this deck, because there's no shift target for this, is the Donald Duck Pie Slinger. I guess technically you could just shift this on top of itself, but they only ran 3 copies. So I'm interested to kind of see how that worked. They did also include the Aladdin from set 1 just to get that lore drain up and running. I'm sure this card was very useful against some of the more hyper aggro decks that could have been featured at the tournament. But keeping with the set 5 characters that they ran 2 copies of Maximus, giving them the passive lore gain at the end of every turn as long as they have characters with 5 strength or more on the field, which, looking at this list, they have quite a few at the back end with that strength total. Although they don't have any characters that would be over the 10 strength. I'm a little surprised there's not the new Gaston Pure Paragon in here. That seems like a pretty no-brainer to include into this deck, especially since they're using like Mother Gothel and Mulan. You can get him out for pretty cheap, and the combination with Maximus just getting you that guaranteed 5 lore at the end of every one of your turns is just crazy good. All right, and now moving on to the top 8. We've got another Amethyst Steel deck, but this one's actually going to be a Jafar deck. Jafar, this set, has a couple new tools to give a little bit extra card draw every single turn. They've included things like the Amethyst Chromacron to get an item on the field that guarantees some extra card draw every turn, but they've also included the new Magica Dispel card to guarantee that they're not having to discard cards away, and they can keep all of the cards that they've been drawing in their hand and ready to draw even more once they have that Jafar Striking Illusionist onto the field and exerted. They also included Pete, Games Referee, to prevent your opponent from removing Jafar with actions, so he'll be safe from things like Along Came Zeus, from Be Prepared. And then the only other new card that's been included in this deck is going to be Archimedes. They've also included the 1-drop Archimedes, but the new Archimedes is a Shift 3 character with Evasive and Challenger +3, giving them a pretty good early game eye attacker. It would be 4/4 when it challenges into something and questing for 2. Giving them enough time to set up that Jafar, set up those Petes, and close the game out, probably in just 1 or 2 turns. All right, and then next up, we've got the Lemon Lime. We've got the Lemon Lime discard deck that was gaining popularity in set 4. It also just won the Toronto tournament. But for this tournament, I'm gonna go over this deck very quickly because it's very similar to the one in set 4. The only new addition that we're seeing from set 5 is actually just You're Welcome. Another way just to target something on your opponent's side of the field or your side of the field and guarantee that extra card draw, or guarantee you get rid of a big threat from their side of the field, which could be very useful because if we're not able to get the Kita out and get a character under that strength threshold to put it at the bottom of the deck, You're Welcome is still going to be able to target it and remove it. All right, and then another top 8 deck. All right, and then next up, another top 8 deck with a new color combination that we haven't talked about yet today. It's going to be the Blurple Purple Amethyst Sapphire deck, utilizing bounce and ramp to get to your higher cost characters that much quicker. You've got your character ramp like your Mickey, like your Tipo in here, all your Madam Mims to keep that bounce going. They've actually included the Bell Accomplished Mystic to move some damage from your characters to opposing characters. We see the Elsa in here just to get your opponents to be exerted, and another rush character. That new Cusco is featured here as well to remove any items or locations that our opponent plays. They've also got the new Anna Mystical Majesty, being able to exert all opposing characters, getting around things like Ward. We see them using the Ursula Sea Witch Queen, which was the prize card for Ursula Return set champs, making it so when it plays up against things like Steel Song, no one's able to sing any songs, and you get that forced exertion whenever she quests, questing for 3, a super strong card to counter what's probably one of the more popular decks in the format right now. And then to just swing the game into your favor even further, they included 3 copies of Mufasa, Ruler of Pride Rock, being able to get some of your ink from your inkwell back to your hand, but also anytime he quests, you can ready everything in your inkwell. This Blurple deck plays very fast, trying to get to your 5, 6, 7, 8 cost characters as soon as possible, and then once you get there, just locking down the field, questing for a lot, and closing out the game very quickly. And then the final top 8 deck is going to be one of those hyper aggro Amber Amethyst decks. They've included Befuddle to remove some characters that your opponent is playing early in the game, 4 copies of Gathering Wisdom and Knowledge to get easy lore for cheap, and then a bunch of 1 cost, 2 cost, and 3 cost characters to ensure that they're playing as much as possible whenever they can. The highlight here of new cards is going to be the Daisy Duck, of course, that when you quest with her, your opponent looks at the top card of their deck. If it's a character, they can put it in their hand, Otherwise, it goes to the bottom of their deck, meaning if this deck can hit into a action, item, or location, it has even more value than just its high stat line and its quest for 2. Otherwise, we do give our opponent another card, which could come back to hurt this deck in the end. And then for the card draw, this deck is going with the library instead of the Chromacron. It's also getting passive lore, so your opponent does have to deal with it instead of dealing with your hyper aggro characters, especially when we have bodyguards like Baloo, Donald Duck, just preventing targeting the high questing characters. Same thing here with Simba. I'm not surprised to finally see one of these decks make the top cut at a competitive tournament. It's been one of the all the rage decks in the series so far. All right, so that does it for the top 8 decks at the case tournament held by Red Saber Games. Now let's actually move back in time to set 4 Disney Lorcana Toronto and take a look at the top 8 decks. The main difference that you'll see is instead of the variety that we had with set 5, we've got some duplicate color combinations here, which is fun to see that we've moved now to a wide open meta. I'm actually surprised that a Ruby Amethyst deck didn't make it into the final rounds of this tournament, but given that Bucky Errata was in place, I'm sure that affected what everyone was bringing to the tournament, and you probably saw a lot more things like Steel Song, which traditionally have a better matchup into things like Ruby Amethyst. All right, so the first place deck is actually going to be Emerald by Diego Saz, and this deck looks very similar to the Lemon Lime deck we looked at previously. The whole goal here is get your Diablo onto the field so you have that card draw, while also being able to discard cards from your opponent's hand, and if they're able to play anything, using things like, we don't talk about Bruno, like Under the Sea, to put them to the bottom of the deck to really keep the board state nice and clear for your early game questers. And then next up we have a second place Amber Steel by David. This is going to be utilizing things like Sleepy Flute, a whole bunch of characters with big shifts to sing your control spells like Let the Storm Rage On, Strength of the Raging Fire, and then when you're out of cards, utilizing A Whole New World to refresh your hand and get those songs pumping once again. In third place, we actually have a Sapphire Steel deck. This one chose to feature Chien Po as a big bodyguard that can get around things like Brawl unless it gets ice blocked, and using Gaston Intellectual Powerhouse to dig a little bit deeper into their deck and pick up some cards that they need. And then also, even though they are running 4 copies of Whole New World, you do see a copy of Beast Tragic Hero in there as well, just to get that a little bit extra card draw. And then closing out the game, once you have your Cogsworths on the field, your Tinkerbells on the field, getting the Tamatoas out with the Lucky Dimes to be able to close out the game super quickly. And then the fourth place Sapphire Steel deck looks very similar. The one thing to call out about this deck is they used the Pyro card, Lava Titan. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may ready a chosen character. This was great because you can combo it with things like Tinkerbell to basically do a whole board wipe because she's able to attack multiple times. You can combo this with Tamatoa to quest multiple times because there's no questing restriction in the Pyros card. And then you'll notice the only ramp that they've actually run here is going to be the Fishbone Quill and One Jump Ahead. We're not seeing any Mickeys come down. They've chosen to include more beneficial characters with more late game abilities like this Pyros and the Simba card to give a little bit extra board clear to make sure that when they play their Tamatoa, they can close out the game with Tamatoa Lucky Dime almost instantly. Moving on to the top 8, we've got a Ruby Sapphire deck. This included the classic early game ramp of getting your Popsicles down, getting your Fishbone down. You'll notice in the items there actually is no ice block, so if something was just a little bit too far out of range of Brawl or of the Sisu card, they would have to rely on like Maleficent to get rid of it. They ran Judy Hops for a single case of item removal, and then the big card that they ran that was not being seen a lot was actually Dig a Little Deeper, allowing them to go 7 cards deep into their deck and pull 2 that they need was insanely strong. I think in set 5 this is going to be overshadowed by the new action that allows you to go 5 deep for 2 costs, but this is just a classic Ruby Sapphire. There's no ice block shenanigans, so they're relying on things like Madame Medusa, like Maleficent to get rid of anything that's out of the Sisu or the Brawl range, and then just ramp until the end game and win very quickly. And then next up we actually have 2 Emerald Amethyst decks to take a look at. This one in particular by Ben is going to rely mostly on bouncing characters, bouncing your things like Ursula, Deceiver to get rid of songs, bouncing Jack to give characters reckless, meaning that they can't quest and they have to attack if they can't play a song with it. And in order to guarantee that they can't play songs with it, they've got the Ursula Sea Witch Queen. Just a very cool deck combination to see here. And then the other Emerald Amethyst deck is actually going to be pretty similar. The main difference here though is that this one is running a Diablo for extra card draw and running Flynn Rider and Curse Merfolk to get a little bit of discard when they're challenged into. So this one I think ran a little bit lower to the ground. And then the final deck to take a look at for the top 8 of Toronto is going to be another Amber Steel Song by Philip. This one utilizing your Sleepy Flutes, 23 songs, even including the Look at This Family to get specific singers from your deck. Another cool card that they've included that we didn't see much of elsewhere was one copy of Aerial Sonic Warrior. Not only could you shift it on top of the 3-cost Aerial, but whenever a song was played, they had the option to pay 2 ink to deal 3 damage to something, giving this deck a little bit extra oomph. And the downfall of this deck was actually just going up against a Sapphire Steel deck that got multiple Cogsworths on the field, meaning that all of this song damage ended up being mitigated. And then once the Tinkerbells and the board wipes were played, it was pretty much game over. But all in all, still a very cool deck to take a look at, and something that we can definitely improve on for set 5, utilizing things like this Aerial. And maybe we even start to take a look at some of these characters that were included as one-offs, like your Stitch, Carefree Surfer, your Aerials. I know I personally love including this Cinderella Stouthearted into Steel Song, but that does it for all of the top 8 decks that we're taking a look at today. Now let's actually go ahead and spin the wheels and we'll see what our 2 matchups are going to be for the gameplay section. So first up, we'll take a look at the triple case tournament decks. So what the computer will be playing, and the first one is going to be the Ruby Amethyst deck from that tournament, and then we will be playing something from the Toronto Challenge, and we are actually going to get the Amber Steel deck that we just took a look at by Philip. All right, and then in game 2 we'll spin the wheel again, and in this game we're going to give the computer the Red Blue deck. And for our deck, let's spin one more time. We're going to get the Emerald Amethyst deck. This is the one by Ben, which does not have the Diablo in the discard, relying more so on things like bouncing Jock, bouncing Ursula, and the Ursula Sea Witch Queen. So let me get those decks loaded into Inktable, and then we can start with the gameplay. All right, so we have the first matchup loaded up. It's going to be the Steel Song versus Ruby Amethyst. Let's see if we can win with an Ursula's Return Steel Song deck. So off the get-go, we do have a duplicate here of Aerial. I want to get rid of the Cinderella, and I'll keep the Robin Hood just in case we do pull a 1-drop Robin Hood, and we'll keep our 2 songs as well. So no Robin Hood for us, and they'll play a Magic Broom. We get duplicates of Strength of a Raging Fire, and we get a Benja card. Now we won't need the Benja because we're playing against Ruby Amethyst, so we'll just pass it back. And unfortunately we don't even have a 2-cost character to play yet, so we are going to be just sitting around here for just a little bit. And luckily we actually pull a Smee, which will allow us to get a play out here. I think what I want to do is ink a Strength of the Raging Fire, play that Smee, and then we can pass. Next turn we have access to Aerial and Lawrence. Lawrence does have 4 attack until he takes damage. Would be able to take out the Sisu in one go, letting it just quest that one time. Let's ink the Bare Necessities, and let's actually get that Lawrence out, and we can shut down one of the Magic Brooms with the Smee. Okay, so Sisu actually attacks into Smee, so now we can actually just sing Let the Storm Rage On with Lawrence to get rid of this Sisu card. That'll allow us to draw a card to see what we have available for inking. So we have Rapunzel, which we can use with Lawrence to get him back to 4 strength, as well as draw some extra cards. We'll ink Bare Necessities, and we'll play the Aerial card just to go and grab another song. I'll grab Let the Storm Rage On just to control the board a little bit better. And we'll put our Cinderella to the top of our pile that's going to the bottom of the deck. They sing Friends, which is a bit unfortunate since we inked the Bare Necessities, but that's alright. Alright, we can ink a Robin Hood and play a Robin Hood. And then I actually just want to sing Let the Storm Rage On with let's get rid of that Sisu card. So I'm just going to sing with both Ariel and then with Lawrence. We get a flute for next turn. And then we can just sing Strength of the Raging Fire to finish up that Sisu. And we'll pass it. I'm hoping they put some damage onto this Lawrence so that we can play the Rapunzel. Otherwise, we'll just use like Sleepy's Flute and Whole New World to get some lore, get some new cards. Since we don't have any damage on the board, we'll just ink the Rapunzel, play the flute. We will sing the Whole New World, and let's see what we get here. We get rid of 2 Be Prepared, which is awesome. And we draw into Rapunzels, 2 small Robin Hoods, and a big Cinderella. Let's gain some lore with the Robin Hood card. Ideally, I should have taken out this Merlin before Whole New World, so they couldn't get the additional card draw. Or they would get it, but then it would go away. We're going to just challenge our Lawrence into Magic Broom. Again, just cleaning up the board. And then let's play a Robin Hood and a Lawrence, getting our free lore with the Sleepy's Flute. They're going to Madam Mim that rabbit, getting rid of our Lawrence for free because he deals no damage when he has damage on him. Ink a Robin Hood. And now we'll actually just take our big Robin Hood into this Madam Mim because we can heal him with the Rapunzel here. So we will heal for 3 and we'll get some songs, which is awesome. So we can sing Strength of the Raging Fire with our Ariel. Let's get rid of the Chernabog. We'll get the lore for the flute. And we can actually play another Lawrence here. And then let's just start questing. And we'll pass it back to them. We've got 2 more songs to get a guaranteed lore, as well as we can deal damage with Robin Hood. Oh, so the board actually gets wiped due to a Be Prepared. That is 3 copies of Be Prepared already played, which is pretty good. Let's go ahead and get our big Cinderella out, since we know they don't have another Be Prepared. And we'll ink a Robin Hood just to get us to 8 ink. We can play both Rapunzels next turn. We can play Rapunzel and Along Came Zeus. And we can quest or challenge with our Cinderella. We get another Robin Hood. I'm going to play Along Came Zeus. Get rid of the Cusco. That'll let Cinderella take out the Madam Mim Fox. We played a song so we can activate Sleepy's Flute. We can then play Cinderella to heal the 1 damage. or play Rapunzel to heal Cinderella for 1 damage to draw that extra card. And then we can just pass it from here. And next turn we have 5 ink on the board. And that'll turn into 6 ink if we can sing or play any song. There's Look at This Family, which I might just go ahead and play it. Yeah, let's go ahead and play Look at This Family. Let's grab a Smee. We can grab the Cinderella as well. Put the flute on top. Ink a Robin Hood. Play the Smee. We'll challenge the Madame Mim Fox with the Cinderella. Quest with Rapunzel. And activate the flute once again, getting us to 13. Next turn we can heal the Cinderella with our Rapunzel, get some extra card draw. And then we have 5 lore right here. 7, putting us into a game-winning scenario. But they're able to take out Rapunzel with the Crab Madame Mim Fox combo. But we're still in a pretty good spot here. We'll actually just start off by... Let's start off by challenging getting rid of the Madame Mim Fox. Healing our Cinderella with the Rapunzel that we have. Now we can quest with Smee. Play Strength of the Raging Fire to get rid of the Merlin. Activate Sleepy's Flute. And then let's play this Ariel just to give a shift target for our big Ariel. We could also pull that Storm Rage on. Again, putting the flute on top and passing. So now we have game on the board, guaranteed, because we have this Rapunzel and then we have this Ariel as well. We know they don't have another Be Prepared. And just like that, we don't even need to play it, but I like the card, so we'll play it anyway. We'll quest with the Ariel, quest with the Cinderella, and our Ursula's Return. And with that, Ursula's Return is winning 1-0 over Shimmering Skies. Let's see how the second matchup goes. All right, so we have our second matchup loaded up here now. We've got the Emerald Amethyst versus Ruby Sapphire. We actually luck out with 2 options for our turn 1 play. We'll have to go with the Chernabog, so we'll get rid of the Pegasus. And then we actually have Ursula into Big Ursula, which is really good for an opener, as well as having things like Kit. We can probably get rid of the Merlin Goat, just because we don't need it until later in the game. And we pull a Jacques and a Kit Cloud Kicker. So nothing for that 2-drop, but we can get rid of our duplicate Kit and play the Chernabog, and we'll pass it back. Next turn, we'll go ahead and play Ursula. Unfortunately, I would have liked to hit the 1 jump ahead with Ursula. We'll ink the Sir Hiss, since we don't need him in this situation. And let's see what the opponent has. Visions of the Future and Lucky Dime, Maui, and Sisu. Unfortunately, we don't hit anything with Ursula, so we'll just quest with Chernabog, and we will draw a card. Next turn, they're probably going to play Sisu, get rid of this Ursula, so we won't be able to play Madame Mim. They actually go ahead and play Visions of the Future. They have 2 of them, so I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe if we see another one here come down. Nope, they play a Popsicle, and then they'll pass it to us. Alright, so now we want to get... I think now what I want to do is I want to get this Ursula off the board so that we can, on turn 5, play this Ursula. So we'll play this again on 4. So we'll go ahead and ink, since they don't have any characters on the board as of yet. We'll ink the Kit, and then even though it doesn't have anything to attack into, I want to play Madame Mim just to guarantee we can get this out. But I think the better play is to play the Merfolk, just to give a higher priority target for them to target with Sisu. Unfortunately, they target our Ursula, which is fine. We'll just need to either find another Ursula or we can play this on 7. We'll start questing with the merfolk. I want to actually ink the snake here, and then we'll play Merlin to get some extra card draw, and we'll pass. We draw into a Queen's Castle, so now we have some pretty good card draw at our disposal. They've got a Maui that's going to attack into the Cursed Merfolk, but also shaving down their hand. We'll quest with the rabbit. I want to get our Queen's Castle down. They're probably not going to let this survive because they have Maui, but Maui could also attack into Queen's Castle. They take out our rabbit so we can draw a card, and they take out Queen's Castle anyway. All good. Let's ink the kit, play the Jacques, give the Sisu Reckless. We'll play Merlin so we can bounce him with our snake and fox. So now they have to attack with all these characters, and they've got nothing to attack. They've just got a bunch of Sisus and Mauis. I wish we had some board wipe here. Let's play our rabbit, draw a card, and then we could pick up that rabbit again to draw another card, and we'll pass it back to them. They've got a bunch of red characters on the board, and they've got a decent amount of ink. The ice block comes down, so now they can hit things like Merlin or Madame Mim with big Sisu. But it looks like they're just going to quest here for now. We can sing Friends on the Other Side with Merlin, and we hit another Ursula. Let's go ahead and ink Maleficent there. We will play another Merlin Crab to draw a card, and we can play a Ursula, and we need to start getting some damage onto these Mauis. So we'll just leave things exerted, so they have to attack into them. The Ursula gets rid of our Crab and our Ursula, or the Sisu gets rid of Crab and Ursula. So now they have a big questing throw on the board, but we have some damage now on the Mauis. Unfortunately, in this game, we don't have much that we can do. We can just ink the kit there with Jacques. We'll make Sisu Reckless. And then I think I'm just going to play some card draw, and we'll play Merlin. They've got that classic Ruby removal there. Finally, we get our evasive rush character. So we can play Peter Pan, and it can challenge into the smaller Sisus. It's got safety from these Mauis. We can play another Merlin for some card draw. And I think we just quest to try and outrace them here to 20. I want to get these Ursulas down as soon as possible. You get some card draw there with the Hiram. Next turn, if we have some surviving characters, I do need to take out the Sisu, as it's the big quester on the board. We finally get rid of one of the Mauis, taking out a Maleficent. We're going to quest with the Merlin, and then I need to play the Madame Mim, drawing another card, challenging into the Sisu, and then we can play our Cursed Merfolk, and let's start earning some passive lore with that Merlin. I'll ink one of these Ursulas just so that if we get another ink, we can go ahead and play both these cards next turn. So they actually get rid of the Lucky Dime to draw some more cards. They are going to be one away from winning here. They're at 19 now. Ursula's not going to help us in this matchup. Let's play Merlin, see what we get. We get an Ursula. Not going to help us either. We can challenge Merlin into Madame Medusa. We can quest with the Merfolk. We can play Friends, but I don't think we're going to have anything here that can seal the deal, unfortunately. And there you go. That was probably one of the worst games that we've played here on Inktable. I'm not sure really what the strategy for this version of Emerald Amethyst really is, besides just like bouncing your characters to be able to clean up the board. It doesn't have a lot of evasive, which we ran into a big problem with those Sisus on the board. They got a lot of Mauis very early to answer anything that we had, so we ended up losing our bounce characters anytime that they would end up exerted onto the field. The Ursula in that situation does not really help us. Yes, she can exert something whenever she quests, but with the Maui presence on the field, she'd be taken out in 2 turns or 1 turn anyway. So all in all, we'll end it there at a 1-1 score. I think it depends on your matchup, but a deck from the previous set can still compete with the new decks that come out. You're just gonna have less tools at your disposal. I think one thing that we can learn though is definitely take the strategies from the previous tournament winners and mold them with the new cards to come up with something better. I think, like I said at the beginning, from set to set, I don't think you're going to notice too much power creep unless they introduce a brand new mechanic. But when you look at it year over year, of course there's going to be changes. There's going to be more powerful cards added to the game, and with Shift there's going to be more options to make more of those characters viable that you might not even be thinking about now. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I know it was a bit of a long one. We had quite a bit of content to go over at the beginning. Thank you again for watching. I hope you guys have a fantastic week, and I'll see you guys next time. See ya.